because our perception is based on two vantage points that are integrated in the brain. We can use aspects of the visuals inherent in that are presented to our conscious mind if we pay attention to them. We can use those as a measuring tool to lift space directly from seeing it and to thereby create a rendering that matches the experience of space, the human experience of space. And that sounds more complicated than it actually is. I'm sure you've noticed that if you look past something, you can cause it to split it and double. Yeah, and that's just because your sight lines are not converging there. They're like if you're focusing on me,
right,
you'll see two blue bottle caps, and then if you focus on the bottle cap, you'll see two of me.
Yeah.
And your sight lines can only converge in one place throughout all of this area. And so theoretically, and actually, you're seeing double of everything else, but you don't really see it. It doesn't register. But we figured out that by looking past something and registering the split double image, you could use that to make a tracing of it. You could use that to make an optical tracing.
I'm not following though, because when I look at the drawing, I don't see a double image.
He's seeing a double image. When he's looking past the edge of the paper, he's seeing that paper split over into a double ghost image and making a tracing. I'm going to show you a picture of how it looks. Well, actually, first, try doing this with your hand. Like, look past the edge of your hand. You see your hand going into
I know exactly what you're talking about now, because sometimes when I shoot, my brain gets so tired, like from squinting my eye, that or I'm looking at action that's going to be happening and I need to trigger at the exact moment.
Yeah.
And so I'll be watching and looking through the viewfinder at the same time, and so I'm actually seeing two different versions of the same thing.
Totally. And your camera appears to be a little transparent, probably.
Right.
Yeah, totally. So this is just a way of utilizing that phenomenon to place a pen on the edge of a sheet of paper, and then look past it. You cause your paper and your pen to divide into this double, and you can see a transparent margin. It's less than the separation of your two eyes. Sure. It's the separation of your sight lines as they cross through the paper plane. You can see that portion of it to be transparent, and your floating pen tip can like go on top of your eyeball.
So he's actually tracing. He's seeing.
Yeah, he's tracing. But he can only trace one vertical margin at a time, which is why we're doing it in these columns. Once that's completed, we'll cut it off, kick it to the side, and expose a new margin of the unexposed film negative, which is still registered perfectly. Do that meticulously, and then kick it to the side as well. And then at the end, you put all the pieces together, and we'll have a coherent panoramic snapshot of the scene as it was optically perceived to our human perception.
That's amazing. Is there some sort of prize or something? A scientific and artistic prize. So
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. We're both left-handed. I figured you'd both be left-handed.
You guys are both left-handed?
You're the smart
one.
one.
Are you married?
Don't make the artist giggle. His lines will move around.
Trevor, what made you decide to make all this what look like fractals all over in your open space?
The circular
Yes.
mark. Well, I needed a mark for shading, and I really didn't want to use like traditional cross hatching, because whenever right now, like a lot of the early drawings, people would raise questions. They'd be like, why are you drawing this particular subject matter versus that particular subject matter? Like, what is it about this external object in the real world that speaks about your like artistic pursuit? And for us, it was really like the act of looking that was the subject matter. So we ended up sort of just randomly, or like very experimentally, trying out this like coiled circular mark. to bring up shaded value for any given section. And it felt like it resonated in terms of how we see the world for a number of reasons. One is that it kind of mimics the texture that you can see on your retina, the kind of electrical texture, like especially when you close your eyes, sort of like visual noise or staticky grain. So for any section of the drawing where it's mostly just like a value, a shaded value, we decided to go ahead and use this texture to kind of say like it's the act of the eye looking out at physical space. That is the subject matter of drawings.
And maybe almost mimicking the shape of the iris.
Yeah, and well, it starts to mimic sort of the physics of what light is doing when it hits the surface. I learned recently that the photon of light only interacts with the electrons of atoms. Like a photon comes in and it sort of electromagnetically catches on the electron and boosts the electron up to outer orbit, and presumably it spins around a few times and then drops back down to a lower orbit and tosses out the electron again. I don't exactly know how to picture it, but I picture it kind of like a discus thrower that catches the discus, and then the centrifugal momentum of the discus causes it to like swing out farther a little bit, and then it gets like popped back down, and it throws the discus off again at some new angle, presumably. So this coiled circular mark was also reminiscent for me and Ryan of that kind of like the quantum activity that photons of light are like interacting or are undergoing as they like hit real matter and then bounce off of it. So I don't know, for a number of reasons it seemed to resonate as like a mark that both talked about light and the act of looking, and we end up so we've done some drawings of like the ocean horizon line where this circular mark can be used everywhere because there's really not much detail in the space. But for drawings like this that have so many physical objects, we decided to also respect edges to like completely, like the edge of a leaf or the edge of the tree trunk, edge of the trash can, edge of the building. Anywhere that there's a physical edge in the world, we decided to respect that and not and either just bring the circles up so they stop on that edge, or if the edges are really small, like on the leaves, to just sort of define the edges. And I feel like that also, for me, seems like a sound decision, because I've heard that in your brain, in your visual cortex, one of the first things your brain does is it locates and finds the edges in the real world. That's like I've heard that from a neurobiologist talking about visual art. So it's kind of, I don't know. To me, it's kind of like okay, if that's the first thing your brain is looking for, then that works as like an appropriate thing to honor. And then anywhere where there are no edges, and it's just like a gradation of light, this circular mark is kind of depicting that like bustling population of like photon particles.
Bustling population of photon particles. I've never thought of that before. I will now.
Yeah.
So would you like to introduce yourself and say hello?
Sure.
Let me back up just a little bit. Okay. And tell us a little bit about who you are and what we've been filming here today.
Okay. Hello. I'm Ryan Oakes, and this is my brother Trevor Oakes, and
Okay.
we're making a drawing here at Getty of a sort of panoramic scene, but it's on a curved piece of paper, and it's utilizing a method of rendering that we came up with, which plays on on human binocular vision.
Okay.
How space appears to our two eyes, and using that as a kind of base for the ultimate goal of what a drawing could be is to recreate how things appear to our two eyes.
Okay.
So we've been creating this drawing for about a week and a half, and we'll be here for about another week and a half, up through December 24th, making this image of Robert Irwin's gardens with Richard Meyer's architecture in the background.
That's beautiful. I was just filming the detail. It's incredible.
Thanks.
Very nice work.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is so this catalog chronicles the thought process that led up to coming up with this method, and we weren't like at no point were we thinking we want to make a better drawing, or we want to figure out how to do draftsmanship better, or reinvent draftsmanship. In fact, if we hadn't come up with this method, we would have no interest in drawing realistically. It was really just we were pursuing visual art and recognizing that anything that you see, like any visual information that you take in, is going to go through your optical set, your optical scope, and the mechanism therein is sort of integral to how visual information should be formatted, or what constitutes a better format of visual information versus a more poor format of visual information. So recognizing that the visual intake was as much part of the thing that you were creating as the thing itself was. And then within that pursuit, we were making these abstract sculptures. So this one is made out of matchsticks, and because the head is a little bit wider than the stick, they fan out and they make a ring, and then if you stack successive rings, this was built upside down. The rings close into a dome, and that's sort of an emergent property of the matchstick, or the single building block emerges into this more global form because of its local geometry. So after building this project, we were considering, one of the most focused upon places of this piece is a part of it that's not even there, and that's the hollow center of the sphere, because every matchstick is aimed, wherever it is in the project, it's aimed and crossing through this floating center point.
Okay.
So that had tremendous focus, even though it physically wasn't there. So then we started to consider, what other shapes in nature share that formation, and there's a lot, trucking lines, like a ship comes into port, drops a bunch of goods, and at a center point, and they get taken away on various veins. But what the shape that really hit home for us was that light rays emanate from the sun in a spherical burst. And then on the flip side, light rays come into your pupil in an inverted sphere. So you've got light rays emanating out in a sphere, and then they're being received in an inverted sphere. And even in the ambient phases, they bounce around in spheres. The light coming off of that surface of the building is like one direct ray would be bouncing and scattering into another sphere.
Which is why we use polarizers on cameras to control that angle of the light.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that led to building another abstract sculpture, which was made out of corrugated cardboard, and is built into the crust of a sphere. This is a series of cubes. They're checkered in their direction, and along the back edge, in between each laminate, is a little shim of paper, so that each cube is about the thickness of one sheet of cardboard wider on the back than it is on the front, making it a small keystone.
Okay.
And then by checkering those keystones, you're able to propagate that curvature horizontally and vertically, and construct the approximate crust of a sphere. with all the tubes of corrugation facing in one direction. And that gives you what is basically an opaque object until you place your eyes in the center point, like in that floating
Sure.
hollow focus.
Sure.
And then all the tubes of corrugation are aimed right at your vision.
Right.
And you can see through
It's
the
all linearized.
entire piece at once.
Right.
Like, it appears like it appears to be like a disintegrated, you know,
Which is a screen.
yeah, a screen. Yeah, exactly. And so that acts as a visual proof that we are looking out into the world through the scope of a sphere. Like, we're not a flat plane looking forward. We're not a line zeroing in on stuff. We're really perceiving things in this spherically arrayed scope as we view the world.
This is mind blowing. You guys have put a lot of thought into this. I mean, a lot.
Well, and keep in mind, this is like before we even figured out how to do this. This was just thinking about vision.
Right.
And it was really like a sort of totally parallel, like sideline aha moment that led to this method that we're doing now. And that was like, you know, one day in Central Park, a little sketch pad, realizing that where you're bored and you zone out, and look past the edge of your pad, you would see the pad divide into a double image because your sight lines are converging on the ground and they're disaligned at the pad, and then you could see leaves coming up apparently through the edge of the pad, through that optical transparency, and you could make a crude tracing of the leaves. And we're like, oh well, that's a measuring tool. That's a way of measuring space, or that's a way of looking at visual space. And instead of, you know, looking and doing like,
Sure.
okay, this tree is 1 thumb, and the umbrella is 1, 2, 3, 4 thumbs. Okay, that's 4, 3. All right, I'm gonna like do some ticks and like try and take measurements and then translate them on the paper. We realized, well, you can get it directly. Like, you can look at the thing, look past your pad, cause the pad to go transparent along the edge, and directly lift those measurements without, you know, using only the mental calculation that your brain is doing all the time.
Why did you decide then to make these strips like 2 inches wide instead of doing a scroll so that where he's drawing is always right on the edge of that paper?
Well, I don't think a scroll would roll up. Like, I don't think you could get a sphere to roll without it kinking. But it's also anywhere in that transparent margin is valid.
Okay.
Like when you look past the pad, your sight lines affix to be intersecting at some point in distance. As long as you hold that steady, the transparent margin that shifts over will also hold steady.
It's wide enough that it's that 2 inches
Yeah.
in those strips.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's a little bit less than the separation.
Oh, I see
of your
that. You
two
said that
pupils.
before. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. It's actually this gets a little technical. But it's precisely the separation of your sight lines at the plane of the paper.
That makes sense.
So like if I'm looking at this post, my sight lines are converging on the post, and anywhere that I insert the paper, if it's close to me, it's going to be, you know, a little bigger. If I insert the paper back here, it's going to be smaller. It's going to be the separation of the sight lines wherever I insert the paper is how big your transparent margin will be.
Are you going to continue to develop more of this, or is this just the latest bit of a discovery that you've made, and then something else is going to come along later, another aha moment, or is this what you're going to focus on from now on?
Well, this is going to continue to progress, and each new drawing is different. Like each new drawing it's reinventing little parts of what the actual technique is, the sequence of steps to getting it to come together. It's like, and then it's constantly unfolding. Like it's not like, oh, now we're just out there doing this on repeat. It's like each drawing is different. Even this is the first drawing, the second drawing that's being shaded in value with this coiling mark technique. The drawings, the prior drawings that were done in black and white were all line work. They were just contours. It was like where you see an edge, you put a line. Almost akin to the David Smith's. David Smith had a little rule that where there's a seam, where there's an edge, there's a weld. So he wouldn't like lock in a piece of metal and tack it in. If there's an edge, there's an entire weld. So the previous drawings were about if you see an edge, you put a line. If you see a bit of relief, you put a line. If you see a billboard that's painted or has an image on it, you don't put any lines. because there's no form there. That's like that would be a printed graphic, but you would draw the form of the billboard or the lamps coming off of it. So we'll start with a logic set about how we're going to translate the scene, and then the logic set will be reinvented with each new drawing.
I have a feeling you guys are gonna progress and develop beyond drawings into some new medium soon.
Yeah, well, you know what we would love to do? We would love to trace sculpture. Because if you had a sheet of clay in front of you, you could carve it out and trace a relief sculpture in clay. That would be pretty cool.
You heard it
Well,
here
we've got
first.
some sculptures upstairs that you can try and reproduce.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So this is about the Alhambra.
Oh, I see.
And that's sort of how it looks.
Yeah.
This is a Photoshop rendering, but when that's kind of how it looks to be in the easel. And so you can see,
That's what Ryan's seeing right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Only this margin is transparent, and you can trace up until you hit this edge, and then that's as far as you can go, and then you slice it away, move to the side, expose a new edge, and advance further into the sheet of paper.
I'm sorry, I meant Trevor.
That's okay. I didn't correct you, because I'm Ryan.
I know you didn't, but I know you're Ryan. I'm sorry. Apologize. Get that all the time because you're twins.
Yeah, it's no worries whatsoever.
How long are you guys gonna be here?
Until the 24th. Until the 24th is the goal. Oh, so maybe this... Oh, yeah, so you asked about the prototypes. That's why I grabbed the book. This was the first prototype. It was a wire grid that we pounded and lashed each intersection. It took a while to make. But only a while. It took a day. But it was kind of tedious. And then that flat 90-degree grid was wrapped onto the surface of a sphere.
And how did you decide what size shape, what size sphere to wrap it around?
Yeah, mostly it was ergonomics. It was what's comfortable to get your arm in there. Like what's it's got to be anywhere between here and there, unless you want to have a long pen. But there's a limit to how far you can reach.
Okay.
So it was just what feels comfortable in there, and it was actually a little too small. This is a little too small. When we build the next one, it'll be a little more expanded. It'll have more breathing room, and it will also produce a larger drawing, which I think will be nice.
Yeah.
But so, what's going on with the shape here is that we have a 90-degree grid, which represents your standard imaging plane. I mean, flat rectangles. That's the art plane in general. Of course, it's not 100%, but that's a very much standard imaging plane for photographs, computer screens. Right. And we wanted to go from a flat plane onto a sphere, but we wanted to do it in a very deliberate way. So we took a flat grid and wrapped it onto a sphere, and that's what led to these pointy corners. It's how that grid contorts when it's bent onto a sphere.
Sure.
And that was our initial shape. We won't always use this shape. In fact, the next drawing we do next month is going to be more of a figure 8 that represents the entire scope of vision, which is more or less your eyebrow to your cheek. It'll be your full field of vision. So that was prototype 1, was this wire grid, and we did a drawing on that. And the wire grid was just a little too flimsy, and it was also you had to to get it to be here, we'd have to stack up some benches or something and prop it on top.
Sure.
Screw it down and use rocks and tether it. It was very, very jerry-rigged. So then we set out to build what was a more rigid version that could mount to a tripod and be easily fine-tuned on site and easily made rigid and not wobble in the wind and be responsive to a pen and so on and so forth. And that led us to the easel that we have now. And with this, initially we would use a chin rest, but eventually that didn't work so well. So we switched it out to this rotating head stabilizer, which stabilizes the crown of your head. The goal, of course, is stabilizing your eye. But stabilizing your eye with a chin rest by way of your jaw, not so stable. But stabilizing your eye from the crown of your head is very rigid. Yeah. But so literally, this whole process was just following through with realizing that you could use the the calculation that your brain is already doing and refreshing every millisecond to tell you what things look like out there beyond, you could borrow that calculation to put the measurements of a drawing on a piece of paper and end up with a rendering that had the characteristics of visual space, the appearance of things shrinking towards a vanishing point, all those, like, all that could be just lifted directly from the primary experience.
Blown away.
That was,
How many locations are you going to be at? Are you just going to be doing this until the end of the month? Or are you going to move around and draw other things?
Just this. Yeah.
Okay. So wow, you're going to work on this for what? 3 weeks? 2 weeks?
About
Yeah.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Like 23 days maybe. And that's actually a pretty narrow window.
Really?
We want to finish by the 24th, so I think it's about 11 days left. It's been 11 days, and we just hit the halfway point.
Wow.
So when this piece is finished, will this piece be for sale?
no,
No.
No, it won't.
Okay.
we'll own it. We'll
Yeah.
own it, and that's actually we have to own it. There's copyright issues with the Getty.
Right, gotcha.
The gardens are copyright. The architecture's copyright written.
So they'll let you keep it, but you can't sell it.
Yeah. We're making it for our artistic study purposes,
Right.
and then to engage the public.
Absolutely, that's what you're doing. That's
so-
cool. Well, thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Thanks a lot.
So Beth